We're super happy to have you here for another episode of Industrial Marketing Live. Just a little bit of housekeeping at the beginning, like I always do. We love when cameras are on. We love to hear from you. Feel free to interrupt, ask questions. We also love the chat. So if you would like to ask a question that way, great. I'll probably still ask you if you want to come on and talk about it. We've got some great speakers here today, and we are going to be talking about customer interviews. But if your question is not like super related to customer interviews, don't worry. We're still happy to talk about whatever is important to y'all right now. The other thing that I'll mention is that we opened a Slack group. So if you have not yet had an invitation to join the Slack group and you want one, you can just in the chat put like a thumbs up or an exclamation point, and I will make sure to send you that invitation here today. That group's been really fun so far. I've really enjoyed responding to folks' questions that they've had about different problems they're encountering between these sessions, and we'd love to have y'all join us as well. So without further ado, today we are going to be talking about customer interviews, why they're important. I feel like we've talked about that a lot over the last few weeks, months. I guess we're well into this year at this point, and how to do them. So to do that, we've brought in one of the best and brightest here from Gorilla 76. She loves that I say that, but this is Rose Hansen. So Rose, if you can give everyone a wave. Rose is a writer here at Gorilla, and she writes for many more publications beyond Gorilla too. You can see Rose's byline in Outside Magazine. You can also see her byline sometimes in the Washington Post. So we're super grateful to have Rose on our team here at Gorilla and sharing her expertise on how to extract information from customers today. So I want to hand it off to Aaron to really jump in and just kind of frame this for us because he's so good at that. Can you tell us a little bit more about why we think we should talk about customer interviews today and what we want to get out of this conversation?
Totally, Peyton. I think for everyone else, I have a philosophy degree, so I'm going to talk about the why quite a bit. But I think it's important. When you hear us talk, and if you keep coming to this group, we keep mentioning focus. I think that's one of the strategy levers you can pull. And what customer interviews do is give you extreme focus. So when we have deliberations, debates about what to do, I can say, what did the customer say? That's our one source of truth. We can go back to it. We can use it to make our content better. We can use it to plan what ads, what messaging. Last time we talked about positioning. The best way to figure out your positioning is to talk to your customers, understand how they understand your product or business right now. And again, we wanted to bring Rose in because I want to be respectful to this group because I think we all get the why. But it's once you get someone in the room, you get a customer in the room, how do you do it? There's certainly better ways to do it. I know I was commenting when I started at Gorilla, we kind of split customer interviews between strategist and content team. And I realized, man, I'm actually not that good at it, right? So I needed to kind of talk to the content team of how they extract that information very efficiently and how they can get that information out so we can use it in our marketing. So again, Rose, that's why you're here. So you can take the horn, tell us what's best practice, tell us the things we're doing wrong, and so we can get better at it.
And Rose even prepared a presentation today too. So I know we're like, is this a webinar? Is this a Zoom gathering? What is this? So I'm going to share my screen and help frame some of Rose's words. But Rose, yeah, take it away.
Hey everyone, I am honored to be here. Heard so much about IML and here I am. I've been in industrial manufacturing marketing for the past year. And I've definitely noticed that a lot of our customers are intimidated with the prospect of speaking to, a lot of our clients are intimidated by the prospect of speaking to their customers. I've done a lot of feature writing And I promise you, if reporters like me or whatever can talk to people, complete strangers, about the most intimate details of their lives, you can definitely talk to your customers about your products and what makes them tick. So Peyton, next. One of the philosophies that I live by every time I sit down to write something, every time I think about approaching a subject, is that every story needs a human face. This concept comes from, I guess I forgot to put his name on there. It's a former reporter for the Wall Street Journal who says that anytime you take something big and meaty, something confusing like the economy or industrial manufacturing, you have to tie it to a human need. It's about, it's about trying to figure out what makes them tick. So what is the pain point that led them to pick your product? And you have to figure out how to show them that your product made that problem go away. I think a lot of the time industrial manufacturers think that, well, you know, my product is a drill and my customers need better drills, but that's not true. What they need is a hole. They need a hole so they can hang photos of their kids on the walls. You know, the emotional motive is completely different from what the marketers or our clients think they are. Next. So how do you pick the right customer? Sometimes I've noticed that our clients try to pick customers who they think are going to tell the story that they want to tell, which is one way to do it. Honestly, a lot of the time you're just going to be limited. There are going to be customers who you think are perfect, who don't feel comfortable putting their business out there for whatever reason, who don't feel comfortable putting their faces out there. So in my opinion, the best interviewee is the one who is going to talk to you. And from there, you can start to hone your skills and figure out where to go next. Brendan, Aaron, Peyton, if you guys have anything you want to jump in and say, I'm not trying to commandeer this.
I do want to jump in, Rose, real quick, because I think agree and disagree, and this is why I love this conversation, is to me, I think you should just interview any customer you can get. And I think often where we run into roadblocks is we're looking for the best customer. I think kind of, Rose, you are highlighting something that's important is are you going to interview someone who's a good talker? Because that's part of it, right? If they don't want to do that, then maybe they aren't the right customer. But I do encourage everyone, any customer's fair game. Like, I think we're always going to extract something valuable out of that.
And it might not even be a customer, right? It could be someone that decided not to pursue your company as an opportunity or as a solution. Why? Like that probably provides a lot of insight that you're not going to get from talking to customers because you're missing a gap there. And so, who are those people? Why didn't you solve that problem that they had?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes we're hesitant to talk to those lost opportunities because it's embarrassing, but it's a really good opportunity for you as a business to figure out how to reshape your message to resonate better with the next person who comes along. So when I say make a target, when you pick the right customer, when you're trying to figure out who to mine for information, what I mean is if you're targeting a sector, ideally you can talk to someone from that sector. So as an example, one of my clients is a big label manufacturer, and they're trying to break into larger food and beverage, the greater food and beverage sector. You know, I guess ideally they want Coca-Cola or General Mills. Well, if we can talk to someone from Coca-Cola or General Mills or Kraft Foods or something, we want to figure out what their demographics are, what they want from their customers, and how we can serve their needs. Whenever I get a customer profile, I start thinking about what I'm probably going to learn from them. This is a hotly debated topic inside of Gorilla. We have strategists who love to say that you can't make any guesses. You have to go in blind and just be ready for whatever story comes out, which is true. But it doesn't hurt to make a few assumptions about what they're probably going to care about, because you can test those assumptions in your conversation with them. And then finally, I think it's important to think about what you're going to use that content for. When we say customer interviews at Gorilla, these are about just learning about our clients new. Yeah, scientific method. But then further down the line, we do customer interviews to get case studies or write blog posts or whatever. So understanding what the long-term goal of the content is, what you're going to do with the interview, will shape how you structure and approach the actual interview itself. Next, please.
Hey, Rose, I have a question on that. So, like, let's say like you really want to figure out like how should we be pricing this product or this service? But is it okay to go in with multiple goals to see if, okay, so we talk about pricing, but what about like new features about the product, or like how are you using the product? So like, is it okay to go into that interview with multiple goals, or should you focus on one goal?
Oh, absolutely. The questions list that I walk into interviews with can be 2 or 3 pages long, which is more than enough to cover a lot of ground. So yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I think that there shouldn't be anything that you're afraid to ask, because if you think it's important, I don't know, you're cutting yourself off at the knees by thinking it's too dumb to question the customer about. At the very worst, your assumption is just going to be wrong, or, price doesn't matter, or it matters more than you realized, or something. Any other questions about picking a target, picking a customer to interview? No? Okay.
Rose, I just wanted to jump in real quick to Brendan's question about pricing and uncovering stuff. Is a lot of the time we do come in with assumptions that are wrong. And then all it takes is to ask someone and figure it out. So many times I'm like, people are price sensitive. And then I talk to a customer and they're like, hey, the supply chain issues are so bad, I will pay for anything if I can get it. Right. And if we just start with that assumption, and that's how we write our content, we're down the wrong path.
Yeah.
So I love that. It's like, come in with some assumptions, test them, validate them, maybe not. You're always gonna get something better to do next time.
Yeah, absolutely. There are very few interviews that I go into where I am not surprised by what someone tells me, but it's still okay to walk in with expectations of what you're going to get out of it. So once you have an interview subject picked out, it's time to start setting yourself up for success. I think a total rookie mistake is just believing you can call your customer and chat with them. When we reach out and schedule those sessions, those conversations, we make it sound so casual, and it is, but it takes a lot of preparation to make it feel casual for them. You cannot just call them cold and hope that the conversation will naturally produce insights, especially if your conversation is limited to 15 or 20 minutes. So at Gorilla, and most reporters do this too, you have to have a way to record the conversation. We use the recording feature on Zoom and then upload it to a transcription tool. Your iPhone has a recording feature on it that works pretty good. So anything that helps you not focus on trying to record things by hand is going to help you have a more natural conversation with your subject. Oh, hey, John. So just because you have a tool doesn't mean that it's going to feel intuitive. So if you have time to run through a couple practice sessions, make sure that you understand where the file goes when you're finished with it, what happens when you play around with different controls in the tool, is better. Oh yeah, and here, Sultana popped in here and she said that the top question that she gets from her clients is if they can see the questions beforehand. I'm going to put a pin in that. We have different opinions on that.
What happens, Rose, when a client says, or a customer says they're not comfortable being interviewed? How do you handle that sort of situation?
Because of the way Gorilla is structured, I never have to deal with that, but I have dealt with hesitant sources. And a couple of the things you can do is set their expectations, make sure that they understand how you plan to use the content. You can also recommend a few ways to protect their identity if that's what they're concerned about, whether it's their identity at a business or the business itself. We just did this for a customer where, for one of our clients, where a customer that we interviewed for them didn't want to put their name out, so we just gave them an alias. I think it does weaken the credibility of the content, but that doesn't mean that the insights that you pull out of it are not useful for your client. Clear?
Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah, Megan popped in here and she said that she reminds people that there are no hard questions. They just have to talk about the things that they already know. Yeah, I think that's really good. As much as you can set them up to feel comfortable, do it. And to get to Sultana's point, sometimes they feel better by seeing the questions in advance. A lot of the time, the interviews will kind of take on a life of their own, and you'll find yourself departing from your questions list, but that's just part of the process.
When you're going into this interview, Rose, what sort of information are you wanting to have before your first conversation starts? And forgive me if you're going to get to that point. I know I see doing your homework is on here, but like, what does that look like?
Yeah, doing your homework is definitely a big part of it. I want to know their name. I want to know how to say their name if it looks confusing. A really good way to blow trust at the top of a call is to mangle the pronunciation of someone's name. So if you can do some homework on how to say it, it helps. I tend to do pretty deep creeping around on them. I'll look them up on LinkedIn. I want to know what their title is during the interview itself. I'll confirm that that's still their title because people don't always update it. I'll see where they were before, what their goals might be. I joked around in my notes here that sometimes you'll find completely bizarre information about people, like that they, won dog sledding racing in the Arctic Winter Games in 2009. Any of those weird points of conversation that show that you've done your homework on them and what they do is really helpful because it builds rapport at the start of the interview. And then you use all of that to prep your interview questions. So go ahead.
Awesome. I guess I could have scrolled down, huh?
So as far as prepping interview questions goes, it is so important. I cannot overestimate it enough. I think of all the things that you can do to make your conversation with your customer productive, it's having those questions written down in front of you so that you can move quickly through them without wasting their time. I always start with verifying their title, because if we use their name and their company, it just adds credibility if we know that they're, the chief maintenance operator or whatever. I want to know what an average day is like. I want to know what they're responsible for. I want to know how they judge their own performance. And these are pretty general questions. They're not about you. They're not about your company. They're about them. Because all of the content and the decisions that you should be making about marketing for your company is about speaking to the things that care about your customers. And things like what an average day is like, what they worry about at night, how they're judged when they want a promotion, those all deal with emotions. And emotions are what drive decision-making, and it's how you shape their behavior to get them to make a sale. Next, you want to find out how they found you. What was the problem that they were experiencing? Why did they pick you? This is probably where a lot of your assumptions are going to come in. You might think, well, they picked us because, I'm just going to run with this drill example, because they wanted the best drill on the market. But like I said, they might have picked you because they needed to hang, family photos on the walls in time for Christmas, and your company shipped drills faster than all the other companies. So you need to figure out what their problem was. I also think it's useful to figure out if they Googled you, if they found you through a LinkedIn ad, if they heard about you from a friend, because that tells you the channels that might be useful for distributing content and what might not be useful to you. And I want to know how they vet my company, my client, against competitors. Is it about price? Is it about the kind of language that they use on the website? Is it about website navigability? And finally, what happened if they chose the wrong solution, the wrong provider? We had an interesting experience with a recent client of ours that specialized in building this software that helped maintenance people track downtime. And we assumed that that was always the most important thing that their customers wanted, that they were always just trying to engineer uptime. and that they found that software by Googling phrases like, how do I engineer uptime? It turned out that almost all the customers who found them were finding them through their equipment installer. So it was the relationships with the equipment installer that needed to be focused on. And a lot of those companies didn't care about engineering uptime. They cared about having less downtime so that they could get home to their families faster, or not have such stressful maintenance operations throughout the day. It's also just important to remember that in your world, when you're developing questions about your product or your company is going to be the most important thing in the universe, but it's not the most important thing to your customer. Can you go back up for a second, Peyton?
Yeah, sorry.
So at the end of the interview, after, they've talked to me about what they do, what a day is like, how they fixed a problem, I always ask them how they felt after solving a problem, because again, it tells me about the emotions at stake behind that decision. I think a lot of the time customers don't realize that their buying process is emotional, but it almost always is. So you're tapping into that feeling when you shape content for them. And if they can quantify those results in any usable way, that's always useful.
We had a question in the chat that I'm interested to get y'all's take on from Matt Park. And Matt, if you'd like to unmute and talk to us about it, we'd welcome that as well. But Matt's question is, how do you handle conflict, like product or service complaints during interviews? I'd really like to get, Brendan and Aaron's take too, because just working in-house, I think it's a little different, right? If you're third party interviewing and you get a complaint, like what if you're in-house and it's your company and they're complaining about your product?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Just in my experience, you go in with assumptions and ideas you want to test, but inevitably, you stumble across things that you didn't anticipate. And one of those things I found is from time to time, there's a service issue, there's dissatisfaction with a particular product. And I think the tendency is to get into sort of defending the company, but this was supposed to be an impartial conversation. So I just want to know what strategies you use to stop putting your sales hat on when these issues come up.
Yeah, I can see how that would be an awkward position to be in, especially as an in-house marketer. I think it's just important to remember that this is about creating an opportunity for yourself and for your company, not an opportunity to make things better, although I guess you could argue that it's there, but an opportunity to learn about how to make your company better. So I would just lean into the curiosity, what did we do wrong? What do you wish this product was doing for you? Do you have any suggestions for how to think about that? Or, the ways that it might be improved. I think just mining that insight is useful. And if you go through an interview and realize that the customer doesn't have any complaints about your product, I think it's always fair game to ask them if there's anything about it or about the company that they want improved. Because again, you're not going to get those insights unless you ask.
Yeah, I think that's right on, Rose. I'd say wherever that friction point is, as a place to is an opportunity for you to streamline your buying process, and then your post purchase customer service. I do think you have to put the customer service hat on there for a little bit and short term help them fix a problem. Identify what's wrong with it, and then connect them with the right resources within your company to get it fixed. And then whenever that happened to me, I would always personally check in on that, just because I thought my brand also was affected by that. So I want to make sure I went in there and I helped that customer, even though I have no idea ever what I'm doing with that stuff in the customer service side. But connect them with a rep, and then make sure you get the answers for them, so that this short-term problem's fixed. But then, like Rose said, figure out what that long-term issue is, so that you can start having that qualitative data to go back to leadership to say, hey, I've identified a problem in our post-purchase that we need to fix to make the buying process better.
Great tips. Thanks.
I'll add one more, because Megan, I saw your comment about empathy, and I think this is a life lesson, is when someone tells you something painful, it is not your job to solve it. It's your job to take that pain and say, thank you for sharing. I'm so glad you told me. I think those things will help you, but kind of what Rose is saying, like lean into that, because we're trying to extract that pain so we can go solve it in our content, right? That's what we want out of this interview. So the more you can get out of that in a very empathetic way, perfect. Let's go make marketing to solve that.
I remembered that Sultana addressed earlier. What do you do when a customer wants to see the questions first? I think it depends on what your long-term plan for the content is. If you are planning on repurposing a recording of that conversation, I would advise against giving them the questions in advance, because people don't like being caught off guard. They want to be prepared. They want to be smooth, especially on screen. And you're going to end up with a lot of rehearsed answers, and you lose all of the authenticity and that on the fly thinking that happens in a normal back and forth conversation. I also wanted to say that now that I'm looking at these questions, stuff like this, the interview should feel natural. It should just feel like you're chatting. Sometimes people can be hesitant. I have some tips on how to deal with that in the next slide, but that's the reason why the recording is so valuable, is because you can take notes while they're talking about things that you want to follow up in while they're answering a different question, because you can trust your recording to hold on to that answer so that you're not losing the opportunity. Okay, next.
I just would like to add, client success people are always going to look out for client success people. So creative people and strategists and videographers, we're going to do we're going to have to keep doing what we can to keep those questions secret.
And one of the things that I like to do, John, just to that point, is when someone, because I'm a client success person, so I'm the person who gets the request, like, can I please see those questions? I like to just say, well, it's going to be a conversation. Here's a guide. We're not going to stick to these questions, but maybe we give you one page and Rose prepares like 3 pages of questions. That way, because the way that we look at it is we've got kind of a base of questions that we want to get answered. Then we customize those conversations when you're doing your homework for each specific person. So we try and keep it as conversational as possible while still keeping them at ease.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's important too that just because you have 3 pages of questions, I mean, I almost always over prepare for stuff like that, but there are definitely instances where a surprise will pop up in the interview and all of a sudden we're off on a completely different tangent, and it's really useful. I did an interview with a customer a few weeks ago where the assumption that I had made was that this customer used our client's product in order to improve the safety of the product that the plant was producing. And that's not what drove the maintenance manager at all. He was concerned about plant safety in order to stop his plant from exploding and hurting his colleagues. And so the entire case study shifted from consumer safety to employee safety. And it was way more interesting than if I had just stayed married to my original line of questioning. When you get to the interview, I'm so bad about this. Try to ask just one question at a time. What I mean by that is sometimes I'll have a perfectly articulate question like, how did robots affect your workforce? And all of a sudden I feel this need to jump in and say things like, were people upset about it? How much did it cost? How much time did you save? And what it does is, in addition to confusing the customer, it gives them the chance to dodge a question, and that's not what you want. You want them to answer each question so that you can extract information. And if they don't answer it, you can just rephrase and ask again. Sometimes I'll space them out if I'm sensing that they're dodging something. But just don't be afraid to poke them. It's okay to make them uncomfortable as far as trying to get their opinion. You just don't want to turn hostile. I've said it a couple times, you should test your assumptions. I like using a true or false format. So I'll say things like, I want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. True or false? At your 911 center, power grid attacks are a critical concern because your phone lines will go down and you can't communicate with first responders. And they'll just answer if that's true or false. And then you can use those facts, you can like put a pin in them and use them in content later on because you know for a fact that it matters to that customer. And then another really, really crucial interview skill is being comfortable with silence. I think sometimes, especially when there are customers and we want to make them feel comfortable, silence is awkward, but that's one of the most powerful tools that you can leverage during a conversation because the other party will impulsively volunteer something. And sometimes that's when you get the most surprising information. So just sit back and let them hang.
Rose, I want to jump in because I had asked you one time and I was like, Rose, I'm not very good at interviews. How can I get better? That was the number one thing you told me was give the silence its due because people will offer the things that you weren't even asking. And I think it's so true. Like once you start doing it, you're like, whoa.
I wanted to build off that, Aaron Weeks, because that's one of the my favorite things I learned in journalism school was just the power of silence. And I think if you're having any doubts about this at all, just stop and think about what it feels like when there's a silence on a Zoom call, which we've all experienced 1,000 times at this point. Like I know I at least, like, I just feel the need to talk. I just feel the need to get something out there to break the silence. And that's the exact case when you're interviewing someone. If you just sit there in silence and if you have to like, I don't know, start counting to 10 in your head or whatever, just to like figure out a trick to sit there, because it's challenging. But if you sit there, that person will keep talking and you're going to get some really good information.
Yeah, it's a super useful, but very uncomfortable skill to learn.
Before we move on from during the interview, I want to make sure that no one else has any questions about those awkward situations or just interviews in general. We'll jump into after.
I feel like I saw, maybe I imagined it. I think somebody asked about a hostile interviewee somewhere, maybe far up.
We talked about conflict during those interviews. I think another part that we could talk about too is just maybe back to like the prep stage is just hesitancy in general. Getting folks to be willing to even have the conversation in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it doesn't hurt to try a couple times. I mean, in freelance writing and reporting, following up is really valuable. So just because you don't hear back the first time doesn't mean you can't just gently reach out again. I would also advise, I don't know if this is like guerrilla sponsored, but I would also advise contacting them on different platforms. I'm way more likely to respond to a social media message than an email. I don't know, there's something too formal about email to me, but if somebody just slides into my Instagram notifications, yeah, I'm way more likely to talk. It just feels, I don't know, safer. So don't be afraid to try a couple different ways, ask a couple different times. And again, just let them know what you want. Let them know who you are and say that you want to have a conversation. Peyton and I have talked about this a couple times. The word interview, I shouldn't have even used it here. The word interview is really intimidating. It scares people. But if you say, I just want to talk, I just want to chat, I just want to have a conversation, I always use that term inside and outside of Gorilla. And one of the other things that I do is I'll also just call it out on the nose. I'll just be like, look, I know that, for example, I just had to do this. I know that you're the only registered Biden voter in your community. And I understand why you don't want to go on the record on the front page of the Washington Post to talk about how that feels. But here are the 3 quality control measures that might help you feel more comfortable with this process. You know, you can show them the content to preview it. You can explain like why you have the chops to do it. Who else you've worked with, who other stories that you've told, other consumers that you've interviewed. And you can just tell them how much you respect their privacy. And if they don't want to do it, then that's okay. And maybe in the future, they might be open to it. You'd be amazed by how many people come back. Next.
Can we, before we move on from interviews, I have one more question because I don't think we've addressed this. How long should you expect to talk to somebody? What's like a fair ask when you're trying to reach out and just get this initial bit of information?
I think that is such a tough question because I'm selfish. So I'm going to take all the time I can get. And sometimes I will run the clock longer than I'm supposed to. I never do that for Gorilla, even though I'd like to. But like with a freelance story, I will tell people shouldn't take more than 15 or 20 minutes. Sometimes I'll say 10 or 15 minutes. And then when you hit whatever parameter you've set for them initially, let them know, hey, I said we'd talk for 20 minutes. We're at 20 minutes. Do you feel comfortable chatting longer? Something that I really encourage, not just in interviews, but honestly in all aspects of life, is you should never give somebody the chance to reject you. So I would never put those words in their ear. I wouldn't say, we've hit the 20-minute mark. Do you need to end this call? I would just say, we've hit the 20-minute mark. Can we keep going? And just, I guess that's manipulative, but I don't know, it works. It helps, I swear. It's so much easier. But I say, take all the time you need, be respectful of their time in the process, and be persuasive.
Love that. Between Brendan, Rose, and I, we had disagreements. And again, I love when we do this. For me, I was like, I think there's some calendar tricks you can do. Like if you book someone for 20 minutes, they probably don't have a 10-minute time block. So once you get to 20, you use the language Rose just said, and then they're going to give you 10 minutes. If you do 45 minutes, they probably don't have a 15-minute time block before their next hour. So once you get to 45 minutes, ask them if you can get 15, right? I think, again, people should value their time and you should value their time. But if you do this way, it's just going to give you more opportunities to kind of get all that time you need to get the feedback. Brendan, you got any thoughts?
No, I think both of those are legit. I never really ran into it. I just would always like play the dumb marketer card and say, hey, I don't know anything about this industry that I'm doing marketing in. Will you like teach me what you do and like how you do it and how you use my product? And then that's how I would like diffuse any like awkwardness. And I would just be like in learner mode and let them just teach me for however long they want to talk. And a lot of times it was my sales team that was setting these meetings up for me because we do it like, a sales call and then me come in if it was a good customer. And so like they'd walk me through their plant and show me what they do. And then like I was just like questions in there like, oh, is that difficult for you to do? Or how long does it usually take you to do, without using my pump? Oh yeah, it takes us an hour to load this chocolate into this big bin with shovels. I was like, well, that sounds like it sucks. So I never like formally like sat down, like interviewed someone on the Zoom. It was more just like walking through a plant or a factory with them.
Brendan, you just demonstrated so many good points that I forgot I wanted to raise. I think there's two really good strategies you can use going into an interview, and so much of it depends on the research that you've done on your subject. Some people like at the top, like if you're interviewing a customer who is a CEO or something, they're going to be flattered if you walk in and you say, talk to me like I'm a kindergartner, tell me everything about what happens in your day. Versus somebody like in the middle who probably doesn't have as much time to chat and who's going to be a lot more humble. I think it's okay to walk in and say, here's what I think I know about your industry. How does X, Y, and Z affect your work? Are there other factors I'm missing? And Brendan, you said that this line, I just wrote it down, sounds like it sucks. That's a really funny and human way to make an assumption about your customer, and it's a way to test an assumption. So just those less formal comments are really useful, and it also helps it feel like a real conversation when you're talking to them.
So we've got the interview in the bag. It's been done. Now what?
So save your recording, put it someplace where it's not going to get lost. There is no worse feeling than ending a call and realizing that you didn't preserve it. I mean, it is the worst. It's really embarrassing, especially if you have to go back and talk to that customer again. If you have a digital recording, transcribe it and chart your findings. What stood out to you about the interview? One of the small things that I do at the very end when I'm waiting for a recording to transcribe is I'll just take a couple quick notes to myself about what was most memorable from the conversation, because that means that there was emotional resonance to it. There was something about it that surprised you, or something about it that moved you, and it will likely resonate with whoever is going to consume that content later down the road. Thanks.
I'm gonna stop sharing the screen, but I want to ask Aaron and Brendan too. So, like Brendan said, you don't always get to be on Zoom or be in a setting where you can really record the call. So what sort of strategies do y'all use to make sure that you're keeping track of just those little insights that you pick up along the way, and like these little micro conversations or micro experiences that you get to have with customers?
I use this new technology called a notepad and pen. like you know, you're walking through a factory, like, yeah, if like walking around, like it wasn't feasible to have a recorder because it's so loud. Like we talked about this in the video episode with Nick, right? It's so loud in there, like having a record doesn't work. And so yeah, it just old notepad and pencil, and you struggle through it and you try to shorthand it and do the best you can. But yeah, that's kind of like what you can do. And then I would ask questions multiple times to make sure and got clarification. And then Rose, I was gonna ask you this question. I would like reach out and just email them, like if I had any additional questions to get further clarification after I met with them. Like, what are your thoughts on doing that, and you know, best practices for asking follow-on questions after you've talked to them?
100%. I follow up with people all the time. I've followed up with people internally with Gorilla too. You know, our customers. I think it's fair to just say, hey, thanks, you know, thanks for chatting. You know, I'm kind of, I'm not as smooth with customer relations as some of you guys are, but I'm gonna say, hey, thanks for chatting. That was really interesting. I had 2 questions about, you know, 3 of the points that came up. Here they are, A, B, you know, just state them as cleanly, as clearly as you can for them, and hope they get back to you. Your note about having a notebook made me laugh. Of course, you know, if digital recording isn't available, I will take notes, but my problem with them is that my handwriting is almost impossible to decipher, and it creates so much more work. The other thing I hate about a notepad is when you're using it in front of someone, it makes them uncomfortable because they consciously realize they're being recorded and then they get nervous. Whereas like with your phone on the table recording, they forget it's there because it's such a common part of daily life.
So I think what I was going to add is, you know, you can take that Zoom recording. Now there's a transcription. You know, we upload ours to rev.com, but then we take that transcription, we go through it, and then we put in a call report. So we have a process to it. And what that does is it equips our team with, again, the assumptions, the hypotheses, like what did we learn? The insights are highlighted. We asked our content team members to give us kind of their take on what did they learn. Again, what we're building is going back to that why, our source of truth. And like now that we've talked to a customer, we understand what we learned from it. We understand what we need to get better at. Then we're going to take that call report transcript, go put in our messaging, go put in our ads, go make landing pages out of it, go make case studies. That's another point is we normally ask people if they want to be involved in a case study as we have them on the phone. It's a great way to build a relationship there to get some content feedback too. I don't know, Rose, if you have any comments on that piece.
No, I agree with you 100%.
So Adam had a question just for us, and I'd like us to dive a little deeper here as well. The third point on our slide, I won't pull it back up, but you know, we're talking about charting our findings. So like you've had a conversation with one customer. We like to use things called call reports. Can you all talk a little bit more about like how you're trying to, how you share that information out? Because obviously you're one person, you had the conversation. How do you make sure that that gets disseminated to your team and builds.
Oh, you want me to take this one, Rose?
Yes, please.
Hey, Alan, you're in this group too, if you want to come on up and talk about it. But generally with that call report, our content team, they're going to, again, really processize, like, what was the question you asked? What was our hypothesis? Then throw me the quotes and then your understanding of what was said. And then we're going to do that throughout the whole transcript. And so in the end, I get this call report that's probably, 15 questions deep, with insight to them. So I can quickly pull out the quotes and start building my narrative for the marketing strategy for the year. Go put that in my messaging, my ads. And then I think at the end of it, we have, like, what we do at Gorilla is we really want to understand, like, what did we learn? So we have one question at the end about what was the one big surprise? I think those are always fun to read because you never know. And I think what we really just preaching to everyone is, like, just come up with a quick process. I think if you had the transcript and, like, even if you just highlight the quotes that matter, you're almost there. I think we're taking a very scientific approach. But again, if you can just kind of reiterate what was the big thing you learned from the interview, then you can go apply that to your marketing.
I have a question, Rose. Can I ask a question right now? Or do I need to type it in the chat? I'm sorry. I don't know.
You can ask it, John. We'll let you.
All right. Thanks, guys. But this is something I've always kind of struggled with, and I don't have a solution, and maybe as a business owner I should, but whenever you are recording an interview, which, by the way, like, I think this was very clear, but, like, for anyone listening, like, we don't just set the phone down and turn on record and don't tell the client. Like, the client knows we're recording. That's hopefully that was very apparent. But you might get some trade secrets, okay? Or you might get some intel that's pretty sensitive. And then you go to a third party like rev.com. I'm just curious, do people think that's a risk? Rose, do you think that's a risk? I don't know. And it's something I've always thought about, because in theory, what you're doing is you're opening it up to someone else who's, who might be typing out the notes, et cetera, but somebody else is now listening to the conversation. So just curious if there are any thoughts there.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I don't know, John. I've never experienced that before. But I guess.
And maybe you're not getting information that's sensitive. Like, you probably also have a little innate, probably a lot of judgment, where as a journalist, you would be like, you know what? There were some sensitive things brought up. Maybe this one I need to just transcribe myself, or, maybe that's going on. But anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I think that would be my first impulse if at the end of a fully recorded interview, especially if the source says, hey, that section where we talked about how we design our computer chips, can you please not share that with anybody? Yeah, I probably would transcribe by hand, which would really not be fun, but yeah.
It's also a great intern job. I'm just throwing that out there for anybody who's trying to figure out a role. We've used our interns to do that in the past. It works.
Yeah. The other thing you can do is just front load it at the start of the interview. Say, if there's anything that you're concerned about with, like, a trade secret getting out, you could just let them know what you're going to do with the recording, not just what you're going to strategically do with the content, but what happens next. So you open the interview, you say, hey, are you comfortable with being recorded? We load this into a third-party software. And then just tell the subject that if there's stuff that's coming out that they don't want anybody else knowing, that you'll just stop the recording and restart it when they're finished.
Adam just posted that Adobe Premiere has an auto caption function that could game the transcript locally, but wouldn't, be outsourced. So that's really interesting. That's a great idea.
That was interesting. Zoom also has an auto transcript that they generate. It's not always reliable, but if that was a serious concern and you didn't have time to transcribe by hand, I guess you could use that too.
Awesome. Well, I know there's so much more we could talk about here. I feel like folks are really interested in particularly in, like, what happens after the interview, right? And we'll definitely jump into more of those sorts of conversations in future IML sessions. Also, I'll just mention the Slack group again. I will post this deck in the Slack group, and we'll obviously put up this recording on YouTube like we normally do for anyone who'd like to revisit things. I think that'd be a great spot for us to continue the conversation on, like, you know, how do we make sure that we are capturing and then disseminating these trends, these, you know, we do one interview and then we do a second interview, and now you see that these two customers have something in common. How are we connecting everything? Just to keep that conversation going, we'd love to do that with you in Slack. Before we sign off today, I do have a little announcement, and we've got John Franco. John Franco is one of the founders here at Gorilla 76. So I wanted to hand it off to him for a second and just shine a light on one of our own.
I'll be quick, and I apologize for looking like I just crawled out of bed, but that's basically what I did today, because, and it's a very good thing and we're celebrating, but Aaron Weeks this morning called me. He's like, or texted me, "Hey John, you got 5 minutes to chat?" I was like, "Absolutely." And we're excited to announce, I mean, we're bummed to announce, but also excited for him. He is leaving Gorilla in 3 weeks. He's got a really great opportunity. So he is moving on. So that is a bummer, but I would be an absolute idiot if I didn't tell this group that we are hiring. And if you all have any interest, or you know of anyone that has any interest, I'll be posting both jobs are listed on our careers page. We're kind of looking at it from a couple different angles here. We're looking at a performance marketer role. So someone doing a lot of the actual day-to-day campaign management and setup, and then kind of more of just a general strategist role where you're more consulting the clients and working more one-on-one with the client. So anyway, I'll be posting all those, but I wanted to let you all know, in case you have interest or you know of anyone who has interest, I'm an open book about what it's like to work at Gorilla. You can also, I would encourage you to reach out to Aaron Weeks. I mean, he has no skin in the game at this point. He's leaving. So I would want him to just give you an honest opinion. And Aaron, I'm saying that in front, don't hide anything. Let him know the warts and all, but I think we've got a pretty good place to work here. And I like I said, I'd be crazy not to share with you all. So I'll post in the Slack.
Thanks, Sean. I'll be in the next IML, but I'll be hanging around. You guys will see me in LinkedIn. And
Yes, you will. You're not getting away yet.
Yeah, I'll be sharing knowledge. I'm not going anywhere. So
awesome. Well, again, we all appreciate you joining. We'll see you guys in Slack, and then we'll see you again here in about 2 weeks. So thanks again for joining Industrial Marketing Live.